Hello students, welcome to Royal Palace PU College Jamkhandi online classes. My name is Sanjay sir and I'll be teaching you biology. Today we'll start with unit number 1 of PUC first year, that is diversity in the living organisms, and we'll start the session of the chapter number 1 called as the living world. Okay, then we will be studying this chapter into 3 to 4 videos so that we can understand it clearly and easily. So be with me, and if you have any doubts, please let me know at the end of the video or in the comment section. Okay students, then let's get started. And majority of the students fail to understand before starting to study this chapter, and that is the mentioning of one of the best known scientists ever, called as the Ernst Mayr. So today we'll be understanding him, we'll be understanding his birth, his contributions, his work analysis and his titles. The first thing is about Ernst Mayr. He was born on 5th July 1904, Kempten, Germany. He worked in the Harvard University. He followed Charles Darwin and his work. He followed the work ethics of Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was so much interested in studying the evolution, in studying the origin of species, of variety of organisms, and he was very much interested in giving the world how actually the organisms created. Now, depending upon the interest of Charles Darwin's analysis of evolution, even the Ernst Mayr also took a specialized interest in understanding how actually this evolution went on. Now, while studying so, he was even interested in ornithology, taxonomy, zoo geography, evolution, systematics, history and philosophy of biology. As I mentioned earlier that he worked in Harvard University in the Department of Arts and Science in the year of 1953, and he got retired in 1975. Another point to be mentioned as the important point here is that Ernst Mayr was called renowned as the Darwin of 20th century. He even received a title called as Alexander Agassiz Professor of Zoology Emeritus. He was the person who gave the idea of the definition of the species, or in other terms, the modern biologists, whatever they use, the definition of biology was actually given by this scientist itself. That is, the species definition was given by Ernst Mayr itself, which currently the entire world follows him. He even gave the definition of reproductive isolation also. Mayr was awarded with 3 prizes during his lifetime, which is even called as the Triple Crown of Biology. The names are the Balzan Prize in 1983, the International Prize for Biology in 1994, the Crafoord Prize in 1999. Mayr died at the age of 100 in the year of 2004. So students, this is very smallest introduction about this scientist who actually comes before the beginning of this chapter, that is the living world. About him, that is very less information in NCERT. As we keep on explaining about him, it will take too many hours. We have already started a new chapter called as the living world, wherein which we'll be entering into the first topic of this chapter, that is what is living. Now in this universe, we can see 2 types of things. The one which is having life and the one which doesn't. But both these parameters are made up of minimum of 4 essential elements, such as carbon, hydrogen, oxygen and nitrogen, etc. etc. Apart from having these 4 elements, can we really differentiate between these 2 parameters, that is living and non-living? Yes, of course. So in this series of explanation, I'll be giving you minimum of 4 to 5 definitions or topics from which we can easily understand that why are we living and how. So today we'll be discussing about the first parameter, and that is growth. So let us understand about growth as the fundamental characteristic of living beings. Point number 1 is that all the living organisms grow. So these living organisms grow from inside and while growing they increase in their mass and they increase in their numbers. We can easily say that these two parameters, that is increase in mass and increase in number, are the twin characteristics of the growth. As I mentioned that the growth occurs from inside. Mark my words, the growth occurs from inside as far as the living organisms are concerned. This particular phenomenon is called as intussusception, which means that the process of increase in mass or increase in cell number occurring inside the body of an organism is called as intussusception. We can take the examples of multicellular organisms also. Here we'll be taking plants and animals as the basic explanations. In case of plants, the growth, of course, it occurs and it occurs by the cell division. And in case of the plants, the cell division or the growth takes place throughout their lifetime. But in case of animals, though the cell division is taking place, growth is taking place, but it is up to a certain limit. And after that, the growth or the cell division will be taking into certain places wherein which the cells have been lost or damaged. We can even observe the growth or the cell division in case of unicellular organisms also. Please remember my words. I am saying that in case of multicellular organisms, that is plants and animals, the growth takes place by cell division. And even in case of unicellular organism also, the growth takes place by cell division itself. So what about the observation of unicellular organisms growth? It's very easy. In the laboratory, if we culture these unicellular organisms, by taking an example of a bacteria, we can easily say that this is a particular phenomenon of cell division or the growth taking place inside the body of unicellular organisms. And when we are growing the organisms under laboratory conditions, the word itself gets an idea, itself gets definition called as in vitro technique. That is, we are doing this in the laboratory. One can easily say that, sir, is this growth occurs only in the living organisms? What about non-living organisms? We have seen the growth even in non-living organisms also. Yes, students, that is true. The growth can also be seen even in the non-living organisms also. That is my mistake. That is, I should not have to call them as non-living organisms. I should mention them as non-living things. So the growth in case of living organisms takes place within, that is from inside, and in case of non-living things, the growth takes place from outside the body. Okay, and that too, it is not a growth. We can say that this is a deposition of materials onto their surfaces. We can take the examples such as mountains, boulders, sand mounds, etc., etc. And we can even give a definition or a statement or a word to this type of growth also. We can say that this type of growth is called as accretion. See, I have given two definitions to you. Definition number one is intussusception, that is the growth which is occurring inside the body of an organism, and that too living organism. And accretion is another type of definition wherein which the growth is taking place, that is from outside the body of an organism, and that too in the non-living thing. So accretion takes place in non-living things and intussusception takes place in living organisms. Done? Right. Since we are observing all these characteristics, and we can say that the growth can be observed in case of living organisms and in case of non-living things, we can easily say that the growth is a fundamental characteristic of living organisms. But the processes, concepts, explanations, fundamentals are not at all suitable to all the organisms. Since this kind of a growth is occurring even in non-living things also, we can say the parameter called as growth is not at all the defining characteristic of the living organisms. Remember my words, students. Whatever that I am saying right now, please do understand them and underline them, that the growth can be considered as the fundamental characteristic of an organism, but It is not at all called as the defining characteristic of the living organism. This is one kind of a neat question that we can easily expect from one of the question papers. Okay, as you all know that we are studying this chapter called as the living world, wherein which we are trying ourselves to understand some fundamental characteristics and defining characteristics of living organisms which can differentiate themselves from non-living things. Yes, exactly. Today we will be studying about another topic of living organisms, and that is reproduction. First thing is, what is reproduction? Reproduction is a biological process, and from this process an organism gives birth to another organism similar to itself. Now this reproduction has got two categories or two types in it. One type of reproduction is called as sexual reproduction, and another type of reproduction is called as asexual type of reproduction. In case of sexual reproduction, we can see that there is a formation and fusion of male and female gametes. Mark my words, remember my words, and they are, in case of sexual reproduction, we see that there is a male gamete called as a sperm and there is a female gamete called as an egg, and these two fuse and they fertilize, and in the future they become zygote, embryo, and gives birth to young ones or lay the eggs. But in the case of asexual reproduction, it is not the case. It is the opposite of sexual reproduction, which means that in case of asexual reproduction, there is no formation of gametes, and of course there is no fusion of the gametes, but there is a reproduction takes place in a lot of organisms asexually. We can go for a lot of examples here. We'll start with example number 1. We'll take the example of a fungi. So during the unfavorable conditions, these fungi produce a large number of, a million number of spores from their body, and these spores release from the fungal surface, they enter into the atmosphere, they release into the atmosphere, and from a single spore we can get a point that from those spores there is a formation of a newer life. So in case of asexual reproduction, taking an example of a fungus, I am telling you that the fungus produces millions of spores from their body to produce the younger ones, which does not include any kind of formation or fusion of gametes. We'll take another example. In case of lower organisms such as yeast and hydra, they do their asexual reproduction by budding. Sir, what is budding? Budding is also very common and known process wherein which a projectile or an outgrowth which forms onto the surface of that organism or inside of that organism, and this projectile or extra bud grows indefinitely. It results into the formation of newer organism, and before and after the formation of newer thing, it detaches from the parent body and it becomes independently growing by its own. We can go for some other examples like planaria. In case of planaria, because of certain situations wherein which, just imagine, let us consider there is a wounded part or there is a cut part accidentally. Okay, now that part automatically regenerates into a new one. Let me repeat it again. A process of formation of a newer organ or a newer individual from the cut parts of an organism or missing parts of an organism is called as regeneration, a type of asexual reproduction which is observed in planaria. Once again, I am telling you that it does not include any formation or fusion of gametes. We can take another process called as fragmentation. Here also, just understand, the body is divisible into a lot of fragments or pieces or cuts or sections. Imagine that a piece of that body, a fragment of that body detaches, and from that detachment, that individual small part of that thallus or a plant body results into a formation of a newer individual.
This is called as fragmentation. And this fragmentation includes some examples such as a fungi, a filamentous algae, and protonema of mosses, etc. etc. Once again, I am repeating the same word, that it does not include any kind of formation or fusion of gametes. We can even go for the examples of unicellular organisms also. In case of unicellular organisms, by taking an example of an amoeba, it also reproduces, but not sexually but asexually. Here, in case of unicellular organisms, there are two terms, that is increase in mass and increase in cell number. These organisms are completely correlated, these organisms are completely connected, or these two properties are completely connected in case of unicellular organisms. Let me repeat it again, that is increase in cell mass and increase in cell number are completely connected with each other in case of unicellular organisms. So we cannot clearly say that is this the increase in number or is this increase in mass. But in the nature, leave asexual reproduction, leave sexual reproduction, there are some organisms which do not undergo any kind of reproduction, or which do not, cannot, or it's not at all possible for them to give birth or go under reproduction. We can take some examples here, such as mules, sterile honeybees, and infertile human beings. These three examples, dear friends, are those examples wherein which these individuals are unable or incapable of giving birth to young ones. If we were talking about the multicellular organisms, the reproduction was sexual and asexual. If we were talking about unicellular organisms, the reproduction was asexual. So when I was telling you about those organisms which do not reproduce, we should have to understand something, that reproduction explains us that giving birth to young ones similar to itself. But it is not applicable to all the organisms of this world, which clearly indicates that reproduction is called as the fundamental characteristic of a living organism, but it cannot be called as the defining property of organism, since it is not giving the correct statement to all the organisms of this world. Okay, and of course, in the end, let me tell you another point, that the non-living things do not reproduce. Okay, students, so in this today's topic, I was telling you about reproduction, I explained you about reproduction, and in the end I mentioned you that reproduction is called as the fundamental characteristic of organism, but it is not called as the defining property of an organism.
Since you know that we have already started the chapter The Living World, and we are studying a special concept called as Why Are We Living, and the study of fundamental characteristics. We have already finished growth, reproduction, and today we'll be studying about another fundamental character, and that is metabolism. So students, try to understand whatever that I'm going to say right now. It may be a unicellular organism, or it may be a multicellular organism. It may be plant, or it may be an animal. Whatever the living organism it may be, all these organisms are made up of chemicals. These chemicals may be in the form of proteins, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, hormones, enzymes, genetic material, etc. etc. You can consider anything. Each and every content of our body or any living organism's body is made up of chemicals. These chemicals may be small, these chemicals may be large, these chemicals may be moderate, but these chemicals are divided with respect to their size, with respect to their shape, with respect to their place of occurrence, with respect to their mode of action, etc. etc. In short, we are made up of chemicals. And whatever the reaction it may be, right now I'm looking at you and you are looking at me. We are listening, we are understanding, we are thinking, we are eating, we are digesting, we are circulating, we are moving from one place to another place, whatever the reaction, whatever the content, whatever the action that we do in our life, it is nothing but a set of chemical reactions. Now, if you add all these chemical reactions which are occurring in our body, it gets a definition called as metabolism. So this is the today's topic, that is metabolism, and it can be defined as the sum total of all the biological reactions which are occurring inside the body of an organism. As I mentioned earlier, that these chemical reactions should occur in unicellular organisms, multicellular organism. You can take the bacteria, you can take the amoeba, you can take a plant, you can take an animal, whatever it may be. If that is a living organism, then it should have to have the chemical reactions or the metabolic reactions. Now, if you consider a non-living object, we cannot say that there is a chemical reaction occurring inside their body. We can take an example, right? We can go to a laboratory, we can do an in vitro experiment, wherein which in a test tube we can do some experiments. We'll add some 2-3 chemicals and we can observe that there actually a chemical reaction taking place. It is simply called as a living reaction. So in almost all the living organisms, it is a fundamental property that the chemical reactions should have to happen. But in all the non-living things or objects, it is not at all the process. Since the metabolism is giving 100% satisfactory points that the chemical reactions are occurring only inside the body of an organism, hence the metabolism is called as a fundamental property, and along with that the defining property of the living organisms. Let me repeat it again, that the metabolism is called as fundamental, and along with that the defining property of the living organisms. Now, in case of metabolism itself, we can see two types of reactions, or there are two types in metabolism: anabolism and catabolism. Sir, what is the meaning of anabolism and catabolism? Anabolism is also called as a constructive metabolism. It can be defined as a formation of a complex chemical structure or a chemical reaction by the involvement or the fusion of simpler chemical reaction, which clearly indicates that in our body there are simpler reactions, there are moderate reactions, there are long chemical reactions. Sometimes these reactions are independent and sometimes these reactions are dependent. Consider a reaction D should have to occur and it should have to get processed by C, and C should have to processed by B, and in turn B is processed by A. Now the work or the activity of D is done only when this product of C is formed. So in these kind of reactions, we can say that all these reactions are interlinked. Now, since I was telling you about the anabolism is nothing but formation of a complex substance by the involvement or the fusion of simpler, smaller chemical reactions. Here, a free energy is stored in the form of potential energy. Now, let us enter into another type of metabolic reactions, and that is catabolism. Catabolism is also called as destructive metabolism, which in turn defines us that it is the formation of smaller, simpler chemical reactions by a complex substance of a reaction, or the breakdown of the complex chemical reaction into smaller chemical reactions. The first one is constructive and the second one is destructive. In case of catabolism, the free energy is converted from potential energy to kinetic energy. So in the end, let me tell you the final task about the metabolism, that It is a sum total of all the chemical reactions occurring in the body of an organism. It occurs in almost all the living organisms. It may be unicellular or it may be multicellular, and these chemical reactions are independent or dependent. We can even take the example of in vitro technique, which is an isolated system that is in the laboratory. If we consider a chemical reactions by adding 2 to 3 chemicals, though it might be called as a living reaction, but it is not at all considered as the reaction occurring inside the body of a living organism. Hence, metabolism gives us a standardized point or explanation that it is a fundamental property and a defining property of the living organisms. It is having 2 types, anabolism and catabolism. One is constructive metabolism and another one is destructive metabolism. One is the formation of complex substance from a mixture or fusion of simpler chemical reactions, and another one is the breakdown of the smaller reactions from a complex substance, etc., etc. Students, I hope you understood this very small topic about metabolism as a fundamental characteristic of living organisms. We have started a chapter called as the living world, and we are at the end of the concept called as what is living, or to study the fundamental characteristics of the living. Today we'll be studying about a topic called as consciousness. So, consciousness is one of the most obvious and one of the technically difficult topic to understand. Consciousness in a simple terms can be said as it is an ability to sense the surroundings. That sense may be in the form of stimulus. It is nothing but the understanding of the stimulus of different kinds and responding to that particular stimulus. Stimulus is nothing but an action which is entering to your body, and understanding that particular action and giving a response, a processed response from your principal, that is the brain. Stimulus can be any kind of an action. Let us take an example. Consider a glass filled with water, and that too a cold water. When we touch it, there is a stimulus. When we touch it, there is an action. So with the different neurons present from that particular point of your body to enter into the brain, it processes. The brain understands that particular action and gives a signal or a reaction in response to that. We can say that this is cold in nature. This particular stimulus may be physical, chemical or biological. We sense our environment with different sense organs which are present in our body itself. We have got the skin, eyes, nose, tongue and the ears. Skin is for the touch, eyes is for the vision, nose is for the smell, tongue is for the taste, and the ears are for the sound or the voice. See, we have got all these different sense organs in our body itself. We can respond to a lot of different stimulus around us. Now the question is, sir, which and all organisms can have this kind of particular topic called as consciousness as a basic fundamental property? I can tell you, students, that it might be an unicellular organism or a multicellular organism with respect to their different abilities of their body organizations. They have got consciousness. They respond to the external stimuli. Plants also respond to external conditions or external stimulus if those stimuluses are light, temperature, water, other organisms, pollutants, etc., etc. There is a topic called as photoperiod. What is the meaning of this? It is nothing but the duration of light intensity falling onto the surface of Earth, and depending upon this period or duration of light intensity, the plants absorb the temperature and do their photosynthesis. So it can affect a variety of plants, and even the plants correctly respond to that photoperiod. In case of animals, they also respond very neatly with respect to variety of chemicals entering into their body. It may be with respect to respiration, or it may be with respect to digestion, it may be with respect to sense understanding, it may be with respect to neural controls and coordinations, a lot of things are there. Our body can do wonderfully in case of giving responses. And this is nothing but consciousness. So, what am I trying to say here? I want to tell you that each and every organism on this earth is aware of its surrounding. Out of all the organisms, humans are the only organisms who have got self-consciousness, that is, awareness of himself or herself. I repeat it again, out of all the organisms of this universe, of this biosphere, human beings are the only organisms who can sense their surroundings and who can sense of their own content, that is called as self-awareness or self-consciousness. We can say that since consciousness is present in all the organisms and plays a wonderful role in understanding our surrounding and giving response to it, is called as the fundamental property of the living organisms. I repeat, consciousness is called as the fundamental property of all the living organisms. But we have got a twist here. Consider some patients in the hospital. They are in the stage called as coma. They do not understand any stimulus. You can touch them, you can beat them, you can slap them. They won't understand anything at all, because their sensory organs or their stimulus capacity having neurons are completely brain dead, are completely useless or inactive. So during this stage, we can call them that they are living, but we cannot say that they have got self-consciousness. Out of all the explanations of consciousness, I can tell you that consciousness is a fundamental characteristics of living organisms, and it can even be called as the defining characteristic of living organisms. But as in case of self-consciousness, by taking an example of a patient who is in a coma, who doesn't have that capacity to respond to the stimulus, is not at all called as the defining property of living organisms. I mentioned two words here, self-consciousness and consciousness. Consciousness is a fundamental and a defining property of the organisms. Self-consciousness is not. So let me enter into the last stage of this explanation of the fundamental characteristics of living organisms. That is, I have explained about the first fundamental character, that is growth, and it is not at all the defining character, though it is a fundamental character. Second point is about the reproduction. Reproduction is also the fundamental character but not a defining character. Third point, that is metabolism, is a defining character and along with that a fundamental character. Coming to the last point, and that is consciousness is the defining character and a fundamental character, but self-consciousness is not at all called as the defining character of the organism. Now, in the end, let me define what is living or what are living organisms. Okay, so we can call the living organisms as the self-replicating, evolving and self-regulating interactive systems capable of responding to the external stimuli. The one which expresses these distinctive characters are called as living. Thank you, students. This is about consciousness. I hope you understood this small topic. All the best. God bless you all. Thank you.